The Arma 2 Dayz mod was a stroke of genius. It took a military simulator with the capability for large-scale maps, huge player counts, and a full armament of weapons, vehicles, and added a simple set of survival mechanics. And of course, zombies. Let's go back to 2012. Dean Rocket Hall engineered the mod after suffering through army survival training in New Zealand and Singapore. He fueled his new innovation with the pain and frustration he endured during these experiences. The zombies themselves, although classic in a post-apocalyptic setting, were not the main focus of this mod. They served as more of a flavor and a hindrance for your own personal survival hell. The focus was people. Only 3 months after release, over 1 million people had flocked to this open-world multiplayer survival game. A new innovation at the time that would be copied relentlessly for over a decade. People were what made the mod truly great. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Rocket Hall built the house to Arma 2's foundation for Dayz. But the interactions that ensued from placing people into this environment were absolutely unique, and furnished the proverbial house. Dean built a world designed to provoke players into emotionally intense situations. A kind of permanent hyper-awareness filled each person's mind. This could lead people to creating lifelong friendships, or to creating quasi-sociopathic bandit personalities, who played and lived the game only to end the experience for weaker survivors and take their resources for themselves. This experiment led players to feel the weight of each item in their backpack and every bullet in their magazine. The more you had, the longer you had been alive, the more you could lose. This created a special anxiety within yourself, gear fear, as it would be labeled. With the only storage you can create being a simple tent or a stashed vehicle in the beginning of the mod's creation process, a paranoia crept its way into the psyche of every person on the server. Is there someone around this corner? Is there someone watching this open field? Will they be friendly? Or will I see the "You are dead" screen after jumping out of my skin from the crack of a DMR? The adrenaline surge from a player interaction, or even the possibility of one, is an aspect of the mod that I have seldom felt since. Knowing that you could lose hours or even days, weeks of progress, of commitment to your character would fill you with a deeper sense of dread than any other game could boast. Overcoming the shaking and the urge to hide, run, or peek prematurely, and surviving and meeting another person in the wilds created long-lasting memories and fantastically rewarding situations. To even get to the stage where you have items to fear losing, you had to learn how to survive the coast. Loading into a server and finding that it is pitch black was my first experience with Dayz. Alone, huddled behind my laptop with nothing but a flashlight and a bandage. I was brutally ripped to shreds by zombies 5 or 6 times well before I ever met another soul. There were no tutorials, no helping hands, unless you were very lucky. And until you learned how to either avoid or fight the undead, you were a sitting duck for the other 30 poor schmucks trying to get away from the coast themselves. The first step to surviving was to acquire food and drink, as these would deplete over the long periods of travel through the original 15 by 15 kilometer map. The second step was to acquire a weapon. Guns on the coast were generally very basic, and often much less dangerous than their military-grade counterparts. Once you had collected these basic items and figured out that the only course of action with zombies is to never stop running, you had a chance to catch your breath outside of one of the coast cities. If you then lived long enough to make it to the Northwest Airfield or Stary Sabor, you were graciously welcomed with the "You are dead" screen, because you failed to notice the fully ghillied bandit with an AS-50 900 meters away hiding under a bush, cramming Franken beans into his leaves like his life depended on it. Oh yes, there were 50 cal weapons in this game. And yes, they did kill you with one shot to your pinky toe. One of the stranger aspects of the mod was that the zombies could sprint just as fast as you, but as soon as they put one foot indoors, they immediately contracted some kind of muscle disease and were forced to stumble towards you at a walking speed. The game had many glitches, frustrating mechanics, and issues of practically every kind. Breaking your leg in an unfortunate location could mean a 2-hour side mission to get to a hospital, only to find there's no morphine to feed your paraplegic character. Or on at least one occasion, I was riding an old bicycle through an open field, brushed the end 3 pixels of a stick on the ground, and died from extreme stick-based trauma, I guess. Early on, people were able to Alt F4 or instantly leave the game partway through combat. Rocks were notorious for being life-threatening to walk on, simply because a Dayz player's leg bones were made of cancer-ridden styrofoam. A veteran player would learn not only to survive the apocalypse, but also to avoid the possibility of each and every possible glitch, like the plague. Accidentally shifting your precious Mountain Dew can that took you 2 weeks to find into your already full backpack could erase it from existence. Hackers were also a major concern. There was a hack developed fairly early on where the user could join a server and decide to detonate a nuke, a full-blown nuclear warhead, wiping the entire map of any life. I saw this at least twice myself. Luckily, you could still Alt F4 the game at this point. If you heard a boom loud enough to sound like the gates of hell opening, it's time to leave the server. There was also an exploit called hive hopping. Early on, most servers allowed you to share one character across all of them, called a public hive. Some players would find high loot areas or common hiding spots and switch servers until they could catch someone with their pants down. People learned fairly quickly that private hive servers were the way to go, and that went out the window pretty fast. It also had the added benefit of weeding out most of the scummy hackers. Despite all the bugs, the sociopaths, and the hackers, this game was loved by many for capturing something that no other game had come close to yet. Except maybe Stalker. But that game was missing the raging Bambis that would scream friendly at you before pulling a hatchet out of their prison wallet and slapping you in the face with it. I would say there were 3 main eras of Dayz for me. The early days, the golden years, and the overly militarized This Is Just Arma 2 with base building. They even removed the zombies in the grass for performance days. The early days were fantastic. Nobody knew how to play. The game ran like crap because nobody had GTX 6900s. And there was a fairly even split of bandits to people who'd pretend to be friendly for at least 10 minutes before realizing they can just take your spare Makarov clip from your dead body. Frankie on PC was still around and going strong with barely scripted content. Things were pretty good. Then what I consider the golden years came around. People had done pretty much all there was to do with vanilla Dayz, and they wanted more. So some talented people started making more themselves. The community took the reins, and the game just kept getting bigger and better. New maps were made, some smaller and more detailed than the original, some so ridiculously big you literally needed a plane to get from place to place. There were jungles, deserts, cold places with snow and aliens and stuff. Someone made Taviana, my absolute favorite map, and made a whole prefab building and leveling system for good guys and bad guys with the Origins mod. Then someone made the Epoch mod. That broke people's minds, I think. It was a modular building system, so you could build individual walls and safes and gates wherever you wanted, however you wanted. This changed the game in a big way. Only a few months after Epoch was released, you had to look really hard for any non-official server that wasn't running that bad boy. Clans may or may not have become a thing beforehand, but now, with the ability to build giant towers all over the landscape, you bet all the clan boys and girls came out to play. It was now safe to live in a hut in the woods, or in a castle, or in the bat cave in the top right corner of the map. And you could store all of your gear without worrying about losing stuff you stashed 2 hours ago. This brought staying power for players. People that were getting bored with the base concept now had a reason to keep playing week after week. Modders started introducing traders to buy and sell supplies for eating and building. People sat outside these traders and killed people, so they added an invincibility zone. Then came the ability to lock vehicles and even buy locked vehicles that weren't on the map. Then custom vehicles were made, like Hello Kitty pink Audis that pretend to be Nissans, and Super Stellian helicopters so big you have to park them outside. The game was exploding with content. Servers were becoming more of a service package, where you had to examine if they had a coder on their team who would be adding to the server, or corrupt admins that flew jets into your base because you outplayed them the day before and took their prized Lapua Magnum. Oh yeah, guns. A mod called Overwatch came out, which had several hundred new guns. People loved that. It became a staple too, and eventually servers now only had Overpoch, not just Epoch. Also, there were now AI missions that you could fight at for high-tier loot. It was around this time that the game peaked, in my opinion. It had a year or two after Overpoch became the staple where things were still really great. I built a base into a ski tower, had a multi-month war with a clan called AOD on a snowy mountaintop, landed 2-kilometer shots with a gun that sounded like a pixie sneezing, made a ton of good friends, got banned from a server for being better at the game. Good times. Then the final stage of the mod came. You could still find servers and have a good time, but now every server had tanks and attack helicopters with full missile arrays and jets that flew 600 kilometers an hour. People built bases in the sky that you had no chance of raiding. Explosives in this game kill you through walls, so base combat more or less became spraying the enemy with missiles, and grenades every time they halo jumped from their sky spawn. If you joined a server, you were the underdog, a peasant trying to contend with tank-wielding gods who brought a 50 cal spawn package from the server admin for $20. The game just became its original self. It was boring old Arma 2 again. Some servers even removed the zombies because they weren't relevant to the experience anymore. Around this time, people started to say that the game had died. I kept playing. It was still the best survival game around by far. Rust, Dayz's ADHD little cousin, was barely crawling, but it quickly started to eclipse its older counterpart. Then the standalone came out, a fully realized version of Dayz made into an actual title instead of a little indie mod. People really hated that. Now, 6 or so years later, the mods for Dayz standalone have caught up to where Arma 2 Dayz was 10 years ago. Odd thought, really, that it took that long to achieve what we already had. Anyway, Arma 2 Dayz was amazing. Is still kind of cool if you want to check it out. Just be prepared to die to Styx and the other one guy on the server who's determined to keep playing the best survival game he ever played. We loved you, Arma 2 Dayz. You were a clunky mess at the best of times, but you really managed to stick in our memories. I recommend watching some old videos on it rather than playing it now, if you want to see what I've been talking about. But if you do want to play the closest thing, get the full game and find a good modded server. Bring a friend and see how far you get. Subscribe for more, leave a like if you enjoyed. I'll see you guys out there.